Hello, I'm Arik Korman, Communications Director at League of Education Voters. Welcome to our free online webinar series, Lunchtime LEVinars. We started this series 6 years ago to share information and build knowledge on important and timely issues. Today's webinar is on new graduation pathways for the class of 2020. The Washington State Board of Education has revised rules concerning high school graduation requirements that take effect with the class of 2020. The new rules have been revised in response to House Bill 1599, passed in the 2019 legislative session, which eliminated the Certificate of Academic Achievement high school diploma that students previously earned by passing the Smarter Balanced Assessment or completing an alternative demonstration of college and career readiness. The legislation replaced this requirement with 8 pathways students may choose to graduate. Our presenter today is Steve Smith, Executive Director of the Black Education Strategy Roundtable. He will provide an overview of the new high school graduation rules and answer your questions. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. You'll notice there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. This is a space for you to submit questions to us. During the presentation, we will also give you the opportunity to use that Q&A, so you don't have to wait until the very end to submit your questions. As always, feel free to send any feedback about the webinar quality to us on the chat function, which is also at the bottom of your screen, or at info@educationvoters.org. Steve Smith has an extensive background in higher education administration, overseeing offices of admissions, student affairs, and community relations. He has been an active member with K-12 and higher educational initiatives at regional and statewide levels to improve the educational outcomes of students. He became the first executive director of the Black Education Strategy Roundtable in June of 2017. Most recently, he served as the executive director of the College Success Foundation's Tacoma office, supporting the educational success of underrepresented middle and high school students. He also co-facilitated the Tacoma College Support Network, a collaborative collective impact organization that worked to ensure graduating high school students had plans for their post-secondary vocational, military, or college education. Steve is on the Pierce College Board of Trustees and serves on the boards of directors for Independent Colleges of Washington and Washington State Charter Schools Association. He has also served as a board officer for numerous civic, healthcare, and social service organizations. Steve holds an MA in educational counseling and a BA in psychology from Pacific Lutheran University. Welcome, Steve.
Hello. Good to be here today.
Good to have you.
Thank you. The new graduation pathways options, as Arik was saying in the introduction, that there was a change in policy from our Smarter Balanced Assessment to creating more pathways for students to earn earning their high school diploma. I would say graduation because I have a higher ed background, the diploma for the high school component. So this is an important piece for students to help them identify directions that they want to go and really help propel them forward after their secondary life and into the next stages of their education and career focus. So the pathways, as Arik was mentioning, we have the state assessment that's still there. So from your Smarter Balance that you meet or exceed the set standards that are there for that test. And so that's a great way for folks to continue to do that. And personally, I hope that a lot of folks will continue to do that because there's really some high standards, and it really gives us a good branch of knowledge about how students are doing and how we're doing as an education system in that process. Students can also do this now through the dual credit. This is where they are taking a course that earns them at least 1 credit in high school English, 1 credit in high school math, but also at the same time it earns them a college credit as well. So this can be done and through Running Start is one of those processes that happens. Also communities in schools are sort of examples of the dual credit. And then there's the AP, Advanced Placement, IB, the International Baccalaureate in Cambridge. Again, these are for both the ELA and the math requirements, and it gives them an opportunity to earn credits there as they successfully pass their exams for those scores. And the thing is that each one of those are a little different in terms of what the scoring requirement is to earn credit. So one needs to take a close look at that work as well. For students that are still taking the SAT or the ACT, if they meet or exceed graduation requirements and scores for on the SBE has set for those, that's another way for them to make this meet this requirement for the graduation. And then there's some transition courses. This is a way to move forward in a course in ELA and math to what the bridging college. So a community college may offer some courses. If students do well in those courses, they'll be able to transfer into those schools or enroll in those schools and be ready to go into college level courses. They won't have to worry about, do I need to take a remedial 90 level course. So this is a great option for them as well. And then there's an option for the combination of things. So if you get an English score in one, you might get an English score in the dual credit, and you might get your math through the SAT. You can combine those things together, and you come up with that's a combination of paths to meet graduation. And then there are two additional. First, the ASVAB, which I'll never remember, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. This is a tool that people use who are entering the military, and it's required for all folks going in the military, and it helps to define if they are qualified, and then sort of some job opportunities for this. And then in particular with that piece within there, there's an emphasis on the AFQT, and I'm not going to remember what that definition is for, but this is part of the ASVAB test that takes a look at measurements in paragraph comprehension, word knowledge, mathematics knowledge, and arithmetic reasoning. And so there's that option for folks. Just because someone takes the ASVAB as their option, it does not mean they have to go into the military. They can just use that to do a demonstration. And then there's the CTE sequence. So this is if you have in a CTE program, a sequence, that usually means that you're sort of doing a progression within a program. And so hopefully you're diving deeper into an area and learning more rigor in that process about this specific field of CTE that a student may be interested in. And hopefully that is going to lead them to some type of state or national certification that they're going to meet requirements for that will help them to be career ready as they leave school. So those are some of the components. I don't know, Arik, where else do you want to go with this?
Well, first of all, for those who don't know what CTE is, that's a career technical education. Just wanted to
thank you
to lay that out. And I actually just wanted to throw one quick question at you, which just came in, which is, what is the score for the ACT, SAT that would be sufficient to graduate?
That is a good question. That is going to be the state board sets those. Let me see if I can figure that out real quickly. Yeah, so pathway options for math, the SAT with essay, you need a 430. ACT with writing, you need a 16. And then for the English language arts, that's a 410 with the SAT. And the ACT, it's a 14. So 430 and 16 for math on the SAT and ACT, and English is 410 and 14 with those two test options.
Okay, great. And I just had one other similar question, which was, is the minimum passing score on the ASVAB, is it 31?
Yeah, it is. And this is an area for my organization and me that was sort of a challenge. So yes, it is 31. It is the minimum score that you would need to enter the armed services. Again, how that dials in and I'm not sure about the scoring mechanisms around that. I think the maximum score on that is either a 99 or 100. A 31 is a pretty low score, I think, on that in that area, and would hope that we do not see very many students coming through that pathway. That hopefully they're going to have a higher score to better reflect the education and that they've learned through their high school program.
Great, thank you very much for that. So Steve, you were asking where we can go from here, and one idea is we could just start the Q&A now since we've gotten a few questions, and if there's anything you want to do to elaborate on anything you've laid out so far, we're welcome to do that, because we have some great participants who are on the line here who are continuing to send questions to the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So we could do that unless you have something you'd like to add.
Yeah, let me just add, I'm appreciative of that we have high school counselors on this pathway. There is a lot of consideration as I was working through this legislation and giving comment to the legislature and to the State Board of Education as they were writing the rules for this for consideration. And one is counselors are playing such a major role in this process. So this all ties back to the high school and beyond plan. The graduation pathway should tie back to your high school and beyond plan. So where is it that you want to go? What are you trying to accomplish in your post-secondary moves? Are you going to a college, a four-year school, military apprenticeship, those kind of components? So the counselor's role in this work is significant. And there's going to be continued work to try to increase the number of counselors that we can provide for students so that we can do a better job at helping students in their preparation for this work. And the piece around rigor, I'm really concerned with rigor as we have more and more pathways, and we'll appreciate hearing back from counselors. I hope that you will share this information through your associations and with your district administrators of how are these pathways really working out? Are you seeing that it's really helping students, that it's being really reflective of the work that they're doing, and it keeps them engaged? I am concerned that, so the ASVAB in particular was such a low score that we would not see very many students coming through that pathway with a score that low. We don't do a service to students, and especially we don't do a service to Black students when we graduate them from high school and they are not prepared for their next steps in their educational path and their work. I was talking with a person in the military who told me, he said if a person is scoring a 30, 31 on the ASVAB, their success in the military is very limited. There's just a lot of things that are a challenge there. So we're going to be working going forward as a state board, continues to review how these pathways are working, and they need to get a report back to the legislature. We'll be monitoring this one really closely because we don't want to see this become a slot where students who may be having trouble meeting other requirements are pushed in this direction to the ASVAB as a way to graduate. So there's some important work there. Also with the CTE, there's a lot of conversation. So the career technical education sequencing, as the rules were being written, there's a lot of conversations around what does sequence mean. And there were some folks that were really pushing that a sequence could just be almost any courses in any program. So if I was doing a program in sort of agriculture, food work over here, and it's like, well, I really don't know if I like that. I'm going to go over, I'm going to do mechanics or IT, information technology, things that, as long as they took 2 classes in a program, that would work. Fortunately, I think the rules did not end up that way. And so now a student, if they have an interest in those two areas, distinct agriculture on one side and information technology on the other, that school district needs to write a proposal and submit it into, they must approve it at a district level, that this makes sense to the students' high school and beyond plan, that this really keeps them moving forward in the career path that they want, and it's going to help them be successful in that. And then the district needs to approve it, and then they also need to get approval for that combination of courses through OSPI. But the best way that you think about sequences, that I am taking an information technology set of courses, and so you're going to take one course, and then you're going to take another course in that same area, and you're going to be learning about the different areas about that that specific industry, and that you're improving your technical and your broad-based knowledge in that field. So sequence really, I'm hoping will come out as sequence, but there's ways for districts to do a combination of courses across programs if it meets the students' high school and beyond plan needs.
Great, yeah, thank you for that. I have a follow-up question, which is CTE pathway issue is about equity. In tiny rural districts, we can't always have a true sequence. How is the State Board of Education planning to address that issue?
So thankfully, I don't work for the State Board of Education, so I know that there's a lot of conversations going on with that, and not only just in a rural district. I was at a meeting in Bremerton, and you had two different school districts. There was Bremerton, and I think it was Central Kitsap School District. One much larger with a stronger property tax rate in one district, and the other one is just not as much. It's not as well resourced. And even those districts right next door to each other had different levels of programming that they could provide for the CTE. So yeah, I think that's an issue that will continue to move forward, and that every school and every school district will not be able to provide the full range of CTE courses that are available. How this is going to continue to be addressed, that's a good question, and someone from the State Board and OSPI are going to be better equipped to answer that for you. But I know that this has been a conversation and is on people's radar, and we want to sort of figure out what are some options for students to receive all the programming that they can receive in this area.
Okay, great. I have one more follow-up on the CTE pathways, which is, can you speak more specifically regarding the CTE pathways? It's my understanding that the 2.0 credits need to be in one particular strand and also needs to include 1.0 industry certification options.
I think that's correct. My area of expertise is not within that pathway for specific, but I was just saying, yes, it should be, sequence would be in the program. So OSPI on their Career and Technical Education webpage at OSPI have a lot of information because they oversee this, they approve those programs, and they're also making sure that what we're doing in Washington State is aligned with national practice in this area, so that a student who is earning, again, if they're getting a certificate in IT here in Washington State, is going to align well with another program that would be in a state like Iowa or someplace out on the East Coast. And so this is an important piece. Again, it's usually within a program. And those breakout of the credits, I'm not as confident in commenting on that, but I know that OSPI has some great resources on their webpage to help give you more information on that.
Great, thank you very much. Now, Steve, I can open up the floor to more questions if you like.
Sure.
Okay, great. So use the chat, make that the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen if you want to submit a question. No question is too basic. So Steve, I have a question right here, which is, how will special education students be impacted by these changes?
So special ed is always an interesting component for the work. And so we're looking to hold students and find ways for them to accomplish these pathways. I think it takes a strong look at what are the abilities of the students and how this work goes forward in helping to move this piece forward. I had a son who had an IEP, not through high school, but during the early years, through 2nd through 8th grade and 9th grade. And that was an important piece of helping him find those mechanisms and being creative, working with school staff and teachers to create academic programs and settings that really allowed my son to prosper in his educational growth. And so this would be something that we would do this as well. There's always this question of, do you do a separate standard for students with certain special education needs? And the state, as I understand it, has tried to make sure that we only give out one diploma. And so a certain student earning this is earning the same diploma. So as you think about that, if I'm a counselor, I'm thinking about here's a student and here's their abilities, and there's a combination of things that are happening. The combination pathway may be the best one, so that they can sort of say, where can we get their best English language arts score, and where can we get their best mathematics requirements on this end. So, but again, work with folks. There's a lot of great people at State Board and OSPI to help solve some of these problems as well.
Great, thank you very much. And I have a clarification about the CTE course sequence, and I can't see who submitted this, but I suspect it could be someone from either the State Board or OSPI.
Excellent, excellent.
Yes, and so it says the CTE course sequence needs to include either an opportunity to earn dual credit or must lead to an industry recognized credential. They can also be 2 courses in different program areas if approved locally and through OSPI.
Yeah, much more succinct, additional information and more succinct than part of what I was saying. Thank you for whoever submitted that.
Okay, great. All right, we have a question here, which is, what specific plans are there to increase counselor staffing?
So I know that within, not in this upcoming legislative session, which has been described by, I heard Speaker Designate Lori Jenkins speaking a couple weeks ago, that this will be a true supplemental session, that we have not really experienced that since the Great Recession in 2008, where you could rebuild budgets in the supplemental years. But this time it's only going to be corrections to the budget that was passed last year. So I don't see a lot happening in this arena, but there's a lot of questions in terms of how do we help improve advising for students. And so I was reading some places where I'm trying to, how do we get to like a 1 to 250 student ratio? What does that look like? And so some work in that arena. Also, what is a counselor? What are the duties of a counselor? So I know that there's going to be policy conversations around this. What's that work that they're going to be doing? As we think of the high school and beyond plan, and we're in these pathways and helping advise students about where they can go, that's not necessarily where a counselor in today's schools spends a great deal of their time. There are a lot of other duties and things that are required of them. So as we think through and think about policy, what are we looking for when we say we want to add more counselors? What are some of those specific duties that would be there, and how do we use those to best serve the needs of students? And so I think practitioners who are frontline work on this right now, as you talk with your district personnel, and if you're in some kind of professional association, and share your thoughts out with them, that will be very helpful, because I know that as people are putting together policy and legislation drafts for this, we want to be very specific that we are creating positions that are going to benefit students in this preparation work for graduation and beyond, and not just adding another similar roles that may be there with multiple duties assigned to that counselor role.
Okay, thank you very much. So I have a question here about the Smarter Balanced, and it says, is the English language arts cut score of 2548 and the math cut score of 2595 being eliminated to pass the Smarter Balanced assessment. Do students now need to meet 2583 for English language arts and 2628 for math to pass the Smarter Balanced?
Wow. You know, I'm going to say that's a question for someone at the state board, because I'm not involved with that that level of detail. I know that on their webpage for the state board and their work, and you see the graduation pathways, there's some information there that I would direct people to see those specific scores that are set. And then the state board does set those scores each year, I believe. So there's going to be a very variation on that. But yeah, I'm not going to be able to answer that with any kind of authentic information for you. Sorry about that.
No worries, Steve. In fact, someone just commented that students need to meet the graduation cut score set by the state board. So you sent them to the right place,
yeah.
The state board.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. I have a related question that was submitted in advance by a counselor, which says, with all of the graduation pathways and combinations that are now available, we no longer have a utility to upload student to MET for the graduation requirements like we have for the Smarter Balanced assessment. This has turned into a potentially tremendous time-consuming task of one, documenting how a student is planning to meet graduation requirements and then adding that to the transcript. Has that been addressed? I know more information regarding the transcript is coming out in January, but like the pathways, it doesn't seem like anyone is checking in to see how this is impacting schools and staff.
I'm going to step back from that a little bit as we go forward and talk about implementation of policy just in general. It's an interesting space, and I think very difficult work when you write policy and then you're trying to figure out how does that get implemented on the ground. The question raises one of those issues of, okay, there are these new things, but our previous mechanics for getting this done no longer serves that process. And so those are some things that I really want to try to pay more attention to. At one point, I had, when the rules were being developed by the state board, I was advocating on the ASVAB that this cut score be linked specifically to the high school and beyond plan. I mean, so if you want to do some kind of cyber technology work in the military to get that job, what's the cut score that you would need for that, and sort of have a better link than just the minimum score. But then as I thought about it, I was like, well, there are hundreds and hundreds of jobs classifications in the military, and how would a high school counselor be able to track all that information? That's pretty tough and unrealistic that they could do a good job. And so I backed off from that. I thought it was a great idea. This is a great way to sort of make sure the high school and beyond plan has realistic ties to the military if a person wants to go that direction, but then realize there's no way that a counselor would be able to have that level of detail in their knowledge. So we do have some things that we need to work on. And then back to that question in particular about how do you upload the standards and indicate that have been met. I think there are other folks that you will need to speak with, OSPI in particular on this, but as I understand it, there are some districts have their own systems, and so it'd be a conversation within your district. How is that happening? I know that some folks at the state, that OSPI are taking a look at this question as well. I don't think anybody's come up with the answer yet, but that is on people's radar. And so we're looking to see what we can do to improve that. But implementation of policy is really tough, and any feedback that you as counselors and people on the front line can provide back up the chain of information chain about how the implementation is going is really helpful, because that will give us things to think about as you think about advocating promoting future legislation on education policy.
Great, thank you, Steve. By the way, how are you fixed for time? Because I've still got more questions, and if you are able to go another 10, can you go another 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I'm
All
going
right, excellent.
to increase my paycheck that 10 minutes.
So if you have a question that you haven't heard answered yet, you can submit it through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. All right, I just have a clarifying question about the ASVAB. So it says you do not have to have in your high school and beyond plan that you are going into the military for the ASVAB to count for the graduation pathway.
Correct. So it is a way that people can demonstrate completion of this pathway option. Again, I'm just going to raise this in with counselors, and my concern about this ASVAB is if a student is not planning to go to the military and they're not looking to do a specific career, this is a pathway that should not be utilized for those students. There are other pathways on here that people should be looking to meet their goals and move forward to be meeting graduation requirements. This is a troubling area just for me and through the process, and we'll be addressing this as it continues to move forward, that we can do something better on this. I have a son who graduated from high school and went to the Marines, and it was caught me by surprise that that's what he was going to do, but it was a really good choice, and so I'm highly supportive of the military as an option for students. What is the best way to help a student prepare to enter the military? I think we need to do more research and thinking about that and hearing from folks within our system, because just taking the ASVAB is not going to help a student, I think, learn all the information they would need to know about military, what branch of the military they want to go to, what kind of jobs they may be looking for, and what are their short-term and long-term options and expectations in looking at the military. I think we need to do a better job at helping students get prepped for that career option. And it's a great option that we must have for all of our students.
Great, thank you very much. And again, that's a minimum score of 31 in order to satisfy that requirement.
Yeah, but yeah, if we can avoid using it, unless that's just my own personal take on that, I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have another question, which is, what mechanisms / data collection are in or will be put in place to determine how students are doing in post-secondary options by each of these pathways? Basically, how do we measure student success with these requirements?
I like that question. And I know that the State Board of Education, again, my role in my work is I do advocacy work and policy assessments, and with the specific focus on how does it impact Black students in Washington State schools. So implementation components are things that I'm not part of. But this is a really important question of how do we assess what's really happening, what's looking when we're done with this work. I'm asking that question about high school and beyond plan. We're putting a lot of emphasis on that plans, and is there a way for us to measure for a student 2 years down the road, how helpful was the high school and beyond plan? Did it really help get them there? And back to the question that was asked, yeah, I think the pathways are going to be an interesting component of this to track and measure. I know that there will be some data collection that the State Board and OSPI will be able to do through their work, and when they see what pathways, well, actually, let me take that back. I'm not going to speak for them because that earlier question about if the standard has been met, or not, and how that's going to get uploaded into systems is still unclear. And so I think how this data is collected is not, from my knowledge, is not clear as well. But it's an important piece that we do measure this, that we understand how many students are taking these various pathways. Are there things that we should go forward with that? There's also been a question of, are there additional pathways? The State Board has been required to do a follow-up report back to the legislature on the pathways options. And so one of the questions I know they'll be asking are, there are additional pathways that should be considered. And again, I'm for implementation purposes, especially when you look around the state and so many districts with so many different levels of ability in those districts just due to their size and their funding bases. Keeping it as simple as possible is something that I would be stressing and trying to push forward to our work. That if we keep growing the number of pathways or expand them too much, it's hard to make sure that each of those pathways have similar rigor and requirements, and that their sort of measurements are all equal. You know, that the assessment of the ASVAB, does that really at 30? Does that really equate to an SAT score or to a smarter balance assessment score? I think it's important that there be some level of equity between the different pathways and what the scores mean, and that they're having similar standards that are being met. And I know that's pretty hard to measure in some places, but it's an important piece. So we do need to continue looking at that. We don't have any answers. I don't know if there are any answers to that right now.
Well, thank you very much. And I have a clarification, and I'm honored to say that we have Randy Spalding, the Executive Director of the State Board of Education, on the webinar right now. And he says, regarding the Smarter Balanced Assessment scores, he says the scores on the Smarter Balanced for the graduation pathways will remain the graduation scores. And there's more information on the State Board of Education pathway webpage, which I will link in a follow-up email, but it's sve.wa.gov, and through there you can get to our work and then graduation pathway options. And I'll send out that link in a follow-up email to all of you who are registered for this webinar. So I have another question here, which is, how do we document a graduation pathway? Is it the transcript, or is it the high school and beyond plan?
Hello, OSPI. Again, another great question. And I'm not certain if this is showing up on transcripts or what that plan is on this information. I think would be helpful, and I know that there's some folks working about this and getting that information out to folks, but I think that's a question for OSPI that I'm really not going to be capable of answering.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. All right, I have another question here, which is, there are so many aspects of the high school counselor duties that could be done by classified staff if we had more. When will the state push the ASCA, and I don't know what that acronym is, a model as a requirement to districts?
Well, that's great information. Again, as I was mentioning, there have been conversations about how do we have more counselors in the process. This is a great question for consideration, because it may be that there's some duties that counselors are doing that could be done by other staff that would free up counselors to do more of that group work or individual work with students. So I appreciate that question, because it creates another way of thinking about how do we solve the problem of providing greater counselor time in direct work with students. But again, it's one of those pieces that are still to be determined.
All right, great. Well, on that note, I really appreciate you taking these questions. Thank you to everyone who asked these questions. I really appreciate you taking the time, Steve. This has been wonderful. Our next webinar is a preview of the 2020 legislative session, and it will take place on Tuesday, January 14th at 12:30 p.m. We will post the information on our website and share it on our Facebook page and on Twitter. Thanks again to each of you for joining us today. If you have additional questions or comments, please send them to info@educationvoters.org. A recording of today's presentation will be available on our website, educationvoters.org, and feel free to share it with your friends or your colleagues. If you'd like to learn more about League of Education Voters or support our work, please visit our website, educationvoters.org. Thank you again, Steve, for everything. Thank you to everyone who attended, and we hope that you will join us in future webinars.
All right. Thank you.